All right, this first question probably should have been done last week because it's a question about the observation by Christians of specifically of Halloween. And every year, invariably, I'm going to get a question or two with regard to the subject of Halloween. And I'll just give you the question as it appears. It says, is it okay for Christians during Halloween to dress up, decorate with ghosts, witches, monsters, vampires, etc., and okay for Christians to visit, and he uses the term, in quotes, haunted attractions and what haunted houses, etc. And so, like I said, I get this question almost every year, either through the house to house or the Burleson site. Used to get it about every year when I was doing TV and doing the morning show, and this is an issue for some people. I mean, there are a number of Christians who object to the celebration of Halloween and other so-called holidays, and I respect that, and I would not in any way attempt to in any way subvert their faith and their conviction. I think in this particular case that Romans 14 is applicable, that there is a matter of liberty, and I will explain why. Usually, and by the way, this is just going to go ahead and be my Halloween and my Christmas talk all at one time, okay? This will be my Halloween and my Christmas talk all at once. All right? So, with regard to, and by the way, the angles on both of these questions come from completely different sides, all right? The one with regard to Halloween deals with, well, Halloween deals with the occult, evil spirits and the matters of the demonic. And is it okay for Christians to participate in things that are associated with, for example, Wicca, which is just the modern term for witchcraft, pantheism. By the way, Wiccans or witches are generally just, they're not what you see in the cartoons, they're not what you see in the movies. They're generally pantheists, which mean they worship nature. Their God is nature. And so there's the angle to Halloween. Now, again, there are some Christians, Bible-professing folks who object to the practice or the participation in Halloween. Obviously, you know that I'm not one of them, because you saw me Wednesday night. If you've seen me on previous Wednesday or trunk or treats, there's been times in the past when I dressed up. Rhonda dressed up for school. I don't know if y'all saw that. If you didn't, I've got a picture of it somewhere. I'll show it to you. She'll be happy for you to see it. And but the association of Halloween with the occult has disappeared for over 1,000 years. Over 1,000 years. And for let's just say for at least 500 years anyway. Halloween does have its origin. I don't want to use the word I don't want to use the term occult, which is O-C-C-U-L-T, because my understanding of that word is that it pertains to the worship of the devil and things of that nature. But it does have what we might say mysticism and spiritism type ideas behind it. Halloween, as we know it, began first as a pagan holiday. It was a pagan holiday. And I'll just so that you can see it, and if you want to look this up on your own, it is a Celtic holiday. Samhain. That was the name of the Celtic holiday. Now, unless you've seen this word before, I'll bet $100 to a hole in a donut that nobody can pronounce it right.
I've never seen it.
All right, here's how it's pronounced. Sowing. Now, don't tell me how they got that out of that. But in any event, it was a Celtic holiday. the Celts were people of the United Kingdom. And in the late 500s, the Roman armies had finally made their way into the British Isles and conquered basically the entirety of what we know as Britain. Now, there was just a hodgepodge of small nations, clans, and whatnot making up those islands, and the main island at that time. And they practiced or observed the sowing. Now, in that observance, it began on October the 31st and went through November the 1st. And in this observance, it was believed that during this time, which was for them the close of the harvest, that the dead would be seen. In other words, those that were deceased would be in some way revived, visible in the physical realm. And so, because at the coming of sowing, the people wanted to have all of their harvest in the barn by October 31st, lest any of these evil spirits spoil the rest of the harvest. And so what they would do was they would do everything they could to have their harvest in the barn by October the 31st. But then on October 31st, they would leave small amounts of harvest grain and food outside of their doors as a means to placate the evil spirits that would appear during this 24-hour period. All right, so now you understand what we're dealing with at its base. Pope Gregory the First, who was the Pope from about 590 to 605, I believe right before Boniface III. Pope Gregory the Great, or Pope Gregory the First, once the Roman armies, which at that time began to be controlled largely by the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman government and the Roman Church at that time were melded together following Constantine and the Council of Nicaea about 250 years earlier. When the Catholics and the Roman armies conquered the Celtic people, Gregory determined that it would be easier to try to convert the Celts and use their pagan temples as places of Catholic worship. By the time the 800s rolled around, about 200 years later, what you had was the inauguration of two Catholic holidays. Two Catholic holidays. One of them on October 31st, and one of them on November 1st. The November 1st observance was All Saints' Day, in which all of the Roman Catholic saints were to be recognized and venerated under the belief that they themselves could come back to the earth during this same time. So what do we have? With sowing, we have evil spirits coming back to the earth. What do we have in Catholicism? The saints coming back to the earth. Guess what October 31st was called, and still is called? All Hallows Eve. All Hallows Eve, October the 31st. Now, it's not a stretch to figure out where we got our word Halloween, is it? And so in the observance of All Hallows Eve and the observance of All Saints' Day, basically the pagan practices of sowing were adopted by Catholicism. But instead, oftentimes people would begin to dress up and go from house to house as if they were, in other words, pretending to be an evil spirit and asking for what? A small amount of food from the harvest. Now, what does that sound like? Trick or treat? Trick or treat. And so all of the things that we associate with Halloween are pagan in their origin. Are pagan in their origin. Those things were co-opted by the Roman Catholic Church to institute All Hallows Eve and All Saints Day. Now, do you remember what year I said that began to become commonplace? Do you remember what year? The 800s. That's 1,200 years ago. 1,200 years ago. All of the pagan associations with Halloween have long since disappeared. They've long since disappeared. As Wayne Jackson said, he said, Halloween is the only day where children can go to the house of a total stranger and expect to receive some candy. I thought that was a pretty good assessment of the day. But his point was there are no associations with paganism so far as the common thinking of people is concerned. All right? And so my opinion on the matter is, and again, if a person objects to celebrating Halloween on those other grounds, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with it if that's the matter of their conviction. All right, now let me move on to the Christmas side of this. It is also true that Christmas has its origins in paganism. That the people, people who were conquered by the Romans, were practitioners of a pagan holiday which is known as the Saturnalia. The Saturnalia. Now, guess what day the Saturnalia was observed?
July 4th.
No.
I didn't know. But that
How does December 25th grab you?
it's cold.
December the 25th was the feast of the Saturnalia. And in that feast and in that observance, there was the exchange of gifts. And in a number of other regions around us, particularly around Europe, there were observances that involved greenery, evergreens. And all of those things were co-opted again by Roman Catholicism when they created the observance of Christmas. Just like the situation, by the way, Christmas, the observance of Christmas precedes the observance of All Saints' Day and All Hallows' Eve. But the point is, what happened is that the dominant religion of the day, which was Roman Catholicism, co-opted the things that are associated with Christmas in basically every single aspect where it was observed. I say Saturnalia. I said Christmas, I should have said Saturnalia. And used those things and basically gave them religious significance. Right? There is not one shred of evidence of any group of Christians observing in any way the birth of Christ for hundreds of years after the church was established. None. Nobody has any idea when Jesus was born. In fact, if you were to simply go by the weather, December 25th is one of the least likely dates for the birth of Christ. Because in Israel, just like in most parts of America, it is cold in December. And the Bible says that when Jesus was born, that the shepherds were what? Out, that's right. Out at night, tending their sheep out under the sky at night. Now, that doesn't sound like cold weather activity.
That's the reason I said July 4th. Because I knew it wasn't baby born in a manger and get cold.
Right.
That just don't sound reasonable.
Well, you're right, Walter. So you have the Saturnalia starting on December the 25th, observed on the 25th. The taking of all of those associated gift giving, the trees, the evergreens, etc., being again brought into the observance of what we call what is called Christmas. By the way, just so that you can understand completely that nobody has any idea when Jesus was born, there was an internal struggle as to when the birth of Jesus would be celebrated at the time when they were going to determine when the celebration was going to take place. The Eastern Church, which is now known as the Greek Orthodox Church, which was essentially not founded, but based in the Byzantine Empire in Istanbul, Constantinople. Then the Western Church, which was the church we know as Roman Catholicism, based in Rome. There was a power struggle there as to when they were going to observe the birth of Christ. And the Western Church won. The Western Church wanted December the 25th. The Eastern Church wanted January the 6th. January the 6th. And with the Western Church winning, they threw a bone to the Eastern Church. And the Eastern Church was placated by January 6th as being known as the Day of Epiphany. Guess how many days there are between December the 25th and January the 6th? 12. From which we get what? The 12 days of Christmas. And so the point is that this thing was being debated, and one side basically overruled the other side, but the side that lost was placated by getting their own but somewhat lesser celebration on January the 6th. So I just say that to help us understand that there's absolutely no basis in Scripture or history for the idea that Jesus was born on December the 25th.
Well,
Now,
if you think about it, there's nothing in there about serving Christ's birth.
right,
It's his death.
right.
Serving.
Yeah, the Bible, two of the four gospel accounts make no mention of the birth of Christ whatsoever. Mark and John don't mention it at all. Matthew mentions it in chapter 1, and then Luke spends a pretty good amount of time in the background and the fruition of it in Luke 1 and Luke 2, which are both extremely long chapters. But Mark doesn't mention it at all. In fact, Mark's gospel begins with these words, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and starts with the preaching of John the Baptizer. And again, John makes no mention of Jesus' birth at all, other than to say in John 1 and verse 14 that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And John essentially begins, obviously talking about Jesus as a pre-existent being made manifest in the flesh, but he also essentially begins with the work and the ministry of John the Baptizer. And so there's no biblical foundation for these dates. Now, having said that, are Christians at liberty to celebrate Christmas? Even though the origins of Christmas are both pagan and the work, and I don't know any other way to say it, but the work of the great apostasy. I mean, the Catholic Church is the epitome and the manifestation of the great apostasy. I mean, when you read it in 1 Timothy 4, you read it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, passage after passage. I'm not saying that those events speak specifically to Roman Catholicism, but rather that the fact that the implementation of pagan practices found its way into the church, and that church eventually became known as what we know as Roman Catholicism. All right? I mean, just read 1 Timothy 4, 1-5. Read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. I mean, there's no question that those are the indelible marks of of idolatry incorporated into so-called Christianity, which again manifests itself in Roman Catholicism. Now, is it acceptable for a Christian to observe Christmas? Again, there are some Christians who are opposed to the observance of Christmas in any way. All right? If that is your position, I respect it. I don't have any issue with anyone who does not want to celebrate Christmas, whether because the celebration of Christmas is Catholic in its origin, or by extension, the Catholic version is the extension of paganism. Wherever you want to draw, wherever you want to drive a stake in the ground in your opposition to Christmas is fine with me. I'm not going to argue with you about it. All right? No, I think because the Bible is silent on this matter, there's liberty. Again, I know some people, I personally know some people who do not celebrate Christmas at all. No, not just no Christmas tree. I'm talking about no exchange of gifts of any kind. Again, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with it. Can Christians, again, so then my position, first of all, would be Christians can celebrate Christmas as what we would call a national holiday. Christmas is a national holiday. No matter what day Christmas falls on, the post office is going to be closed, right? No matter what day Christmas falls on, Wall Street's going to be closed. Even Walmart is closed. Right? Sometimes. They may change at some point in the future. Right? But my point is that Christmas is recognized basically as a national holiday. And millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people all over the world celebrate Christmas with absolutely zero religious connotation whatsoever. Guess who else celebrates Christmas? Atheists. Atheists celebrate Christmas. You know how I know that? Because one of my dear childhood friends is an atheist. And he and his family celebrate Christmas. Do you think there's any religious connotation to the celebration of Christmas in his house? He's probably got a tree, but he's probably not got a nativity scene. All right, he's got the lights and the tinsel, but he doesn't have the animals. Celebrates Christmas with no religious significance whatsoever. I'm 53 years old. All of my life, my family celebrated Christmas. We never one time celebrated it in any way associated with the birth of Jesus. There was no Bible reading before our family dinner. There was no mention of the birth of Christ. In my house, there were no nativity scenes, although there was a star on top of the Christmas tree. Which, by the way, is combining a pagan symbol with a religious symbol. All right? We never sang Christmas songs, so far as songs that were, give me one. I mean, we didn't celebrate to the extent I can't even think of Silent Night. Away in a Manger. All right. Okay. All right, good. Oh, all right. Appreciate all my apostate brethren giving me all these baby Jesus songs to be sung at Christmas. Y'all know I'm just kidding. Kind of. But anyway, we never sang. By the way, there was one Christmas I do remember when we went to my dad's parents' house, and they were members of a denomination in town, and they were singing the baby Jesus songs, and I didn't know words to none of them.
You didn't sing them at school?
No. And my aunt and my uncle, one played the piano, and the whole family sang, and I didn't know none of them words. I didn't know any of them. Maybe kind of uncomfortable not knowing them, But nevertheless, I just want you to know how my family celebrated Christmas and that there was no religious connection to it whatsoever. Again, not even so much, I guess, so much in the decorations, so to speak.
Special service.
Sir?
We're not going to have a service celebrating Christmas.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Basically, the only day we're going to assemble on Christmas is if Christmas on Sunday. And it's not because it's Christmas, but it's because it's Sunday. All right. And so now let me go one step further. And I realize that in doing this, it's going to cut me off from doing my other question. So, and I apologize for that. Is it okay? Is it permissible for a Christian in the confines of their own home, in the celebration of Christmas, to engage in some recognition of the birth of Jesus? Now, probably 25 or 30 years ago, I would have said no. I would have said no. But I've changed my thinking on that. And I'll tell you why. Because what we do in our homes is what we do in our homes. And if a person wanted to have, for example, a nativity scene, if they want to put up the wise men, Rhonda decorates our house for Christmas. I don't have nothing to do with it. In fact, when that thing goes, I just haul up the boxes and I'll leave. Whatever Rhonda wants to put up is what Rhonda wants to put up. All right? And it's always been that way. I think although as we get older, we got more and more stuff to put up, or she does. But if a Christian wants to celebrate or in some way recognize the birth of Jesus as a part of their family celebration, I cannot find a scripture that forbids such. Because it's not a matter of religious practice, it's a matter of personal preference. There has to, in my opinion, in my mind, there has to be some degree of liberty in these things. Again, 25 years ago, I would have said, if you even have a single vestige of anything in your house that relates to the birth of Christ for Christmas, I would have a big problem with it.
You ever heard about Saturnalia?
Yeah, I've heard about Saturnalia.
In the 50s, that's what we did.
Yeah.
We dressed up. Nobody knew who it was. We went in, they weren't friendly to us, and we do something to them.
So y'all combined Christmas and Halloween.
Well, if you go against...
You dressed up and you sang, and if they weren't nice, you egged their house. Is that what you're saying? Something like that.
Hey, Todd, if you go against your conscience...
That's right. If you go against your conscience, that would be therein would be a problem. And by the way, the celebration of Christmas in the context of the birth of Christ at one time would have violated my conscience. But if I were at somebody's house and they did that today, it would not violate my conscience because it's their house and it's their decision. It's their decision. As you probably, if those of you that have been here a long time know, except for sometimes around Easter, I don't preach on anything pertaining to any holiday. I just don't. And the reason, for example, that I don't preach on the birth of Christ at Christmas is simply because I don't want people to misunderstand what my attitude toward Christmas is. And I don't want to have to take 10 minutes at the front of my sermon to give an extensive disclaimer before I actually say what I want to say. I think maybe this past year or year before I preached about mothers on Mother's Day for the first time in 25 years. It's just not something that I do. I'm just turned that way, I guess. I don't know. But my thinking on this has changed through the years. As I think more about the matter of personal liberty, as a matter of conscience, that people are free to do what they want in their home, as long as there's no violation of Scripture. Is it a violation of Scripture to celebrate or to recognize the birth of Jesus? I'm pretty sure it's not, because it's in the Bible. Now, if we were going to turn around and do it here on Christmas Sunday or have a special service on Christmas Day, then I'm going to have some issues with it. But so far as what people do in their home, I think there has to be the matter of liberty. I think if you're going to respect the person that does not celebrate it at all, and then the person that celebrates it or in some way attaches the birth of Christ to it, and probably the majority of us that are in the middle, there has to be the matter of liberty. All right? Does that make sense? All right. Any questions about anything I've said with regard to Halloween or Christmas? By the way, almost every single holiday is founded in some form of paganism. Some form of paganism. Even the celebration of Easter has pagan origins, and comes from an old German Ostory, I believe is how it's pronounced. That's where the rabbit and the eggs came from. All right. Now, with regard to the date of Easter, the date of Easter falls in connection to the Jewish Passover. That's why it's not on a certain time every year, because Passover is a lunar holiday, and Passover is connected obviously to the death of Christ. It seems to me that Easter should always be celebrated exactly when Passover is observed. And I don't think that's the case. I think there's a period of time in between Passover.
Yeah, so many days.
Yeah, I think that's right. But if you were going to celebrate Easter in some way, and you were going to do it in a religious sense, it would almost invariably have to be connected to Passover. Because Christ was sacrificed, killed, during the feast of Passover. But again, even then, many of the things that have become associated with Easter, like I said, the Easter eggs, the bunny and all that, every one of those things has pagan origins. It's all rooted in some form of paganism. But you're not going to see me railing against people that have an Easter egg hunt, because nobody believes that having an Easter egg hunt is in any way connected with paganism. Moreover, with regard to Easter is a little bit different than the other so-called holidays, in that while the world focuses on the resurrection of Christ, expressly on Easter, Christians focus on it when? The first day of every week, every single Lord's Day. In other words, we've been given instruction on the observance of the Lord's death. And that observance is seen in the Lord's Supper every Lord's Day service, every Lord's Day assembly. And so there's a difference in how that holiday manifested itself and the practices that are attached to it. And so with that, and with that in mind, we need, and I don't know, all of us understand this, that we we commemorate the Lord's death every single first day of the week, as the church did, as Jesus instituted in Matthew 26, as the church did from its earliest days, that we remember the Lord's death every first day of the week in the observance of the Lord's Supper. That is what is authorized, and nothing else besides that is authorized. All right, any questions about that? Anything needs to be added or clarified? No? We good to go? All right. Well, then I've got another question. That was one page, and I had two more behind it. So I don't want to be here all night and have some of y'all go all Eutychus on me, and so we'll shut this one.
What's the next question? You don't have to tell us about it. Just what was it?
Well, it's on the handout. The question was given to me. It says, why does the Methodist Church sprinkle babies? And that was the question that was given. Now, I'm not going to answer the question, but I'm going to tell you this. All religions that sprinkle infants do not necessarily sprinkle them for the same reason. Not necessarily. By the same means that not everyone who practices immersion immerses for the same reason. I mean, I can think of 5 different religious groups that practice immersion, maybe more. I'm talking about primary religious groups, not just little offshoots. I can think of at least 5 major religious organizations that practice immersion. And none of them practice immersion for the same reason. And so it's not just simply, and look, I've put a lot of time into studying this because, first of all, I don't want to misrepresent anybody. I don't want to misrepresent anybody. And I'll spend some more time studying it between now, Lord willing, and, Sunday week. But
Like us, we believe that you have to be baptized to be saved. Some of them believe you're saved, then you're baptized.
Right.
Various
that's right.
baptized.
You have, but both immerse, but for completely different reasons.
Reason, yeah.
And so you can't paint all immersers with the same brush, and you can't paint all sprinklers with the same brush. And so my study has been focused exclusively. And by the way, and the material that I've studied thus far, and the material that I'll bring to you when we do this again, comes from the 2 websites that are from the United Methodist Church. One of them is umc.org. The other is umcdiscipleship.org. And I plan to upload a couple of documents that are official UMC documents on the matter of baptism and read. In other words, now that I got a little more time, I found some documents that I would like to read in order to expand my understanding of that practice. And so the next time we have questions and answers, which now that I think about it, it's going to be 3 weeks because no, it'll be next week. I should be home in time. I should be home in time from my meeting in Anniston next week to do it. So it should be next week. We'll start on this next Sunday night.